Good morning, everybody. As you go to the Chita, so this week is Parshas Vayakel. Many years it's Vayakol Pekudei together. This year it's only Vayakel. Vayak chapter 35, verse number 1. Vayakel Moshe Kol Adas Moshe Rabbeinu gathered in all the Jewish people. Vayem Aleim, he told them, Eila Dvarim, these are the words of Hashem Lasei Seisem. These are the words which God has commanded them to do. Ashi says, this was a day after Yom Kippur. Lamachos Yom Kippur, this was a day after Yom Kippur. Ki Yadam Anahar, when it came down with the mount from the mountain with the second luchos. And the term Vayakel is a causative form because one does not assemble people physically with one's hand, but he causes them to assemble. Verse number 2, Sheish Yom Tasav Alach, for 6 days a week you shall work. Vayei Mashvi, on the seventh day, Yelachem Kodesh, it should be holy. Shabbos Shabbosin, it's a Shabbos of Shabboses. Koloisim Alacha Yumas, whoever works shall be put to death. She says, Moshe Rabbeinu told them the warning of keeping Shabbos prior to the instruction of the construction of the Beis Hamikdash. Why? In order to convey the fact that even though they're going to go build the Beis Hamikdash and everybody's excited to build the Beis Hamikdash, nevertheless, you're not allowed to work on Shabbos. You're not allowed to build a Mishkan on Shabbos. Verse number 3, you're not allowed to kindle a fire in any of your dwellings b'yom Shabbos on the day of Shabbos. The 39 malachas, why did the Torah say about concerning fire? Some sages say that the kindling of fire was singled out from other works, from the other 38 works of Shabbos, in order to give it a stature as an ordinary passive commandment. That means fire, making a fire on Shabbos is not like the other 38 malachas, the other 38 works, which is Chas Shalom, it's Chayiv Misa, the opposite of life. But over here you get lashes. And some people say lachalik yasif. Some people say the point of separating the law of fire is lachalik. Comes to tell us that every avera is separate. That means, as the Gemara tells us, we can do one act on Shabbos sometimes, and by that doing a couple of malachas. The Gemara says sometimes you can do 11 malachas in one act. You can do 11 different malachas. The Gemara explains. Right. Verse number 4. And Moshe spoke to the Jewish nation. And he said, this is the word. This is the word what God commanded. Rashi says, what it means, this is what God commanded to tell you. You should take a contribution to God. Everybody who has a good-hearted person should bring a donation to God. Gold, silver, and copper. Now she says, Nediv Libay, generous of heart, since it's a person heart that prompts it to give donation, he's called an Nediv Leiv. He's a good, generous heart. Now she says, I've already explained the counter materials of the Beis Hamikdash. I already explained this in Parsha Tetzaveh and Truma Tetzaveh, so I don't have to go through all the how this thing was done. We should already know what was what's going to say in the present time. They should give dyed Turkish wool, and dyed purple wool with plashani, and wool dyed of scarlet, sheish, izim, and goat's hair. They should bring dyed red ram skins. Tchoshim and tchoshim skins, shittim and acacia wood. Shemal, they should bring oil for the luminary, some shemal mishcha, and spices for anointing oil. And for the incense offering. They should bring onyx stones. And incense stones. Whether it was for the aphid or the for the choshen itself. And all wise of heart person should come forth. And they should do whatever God commanded. As a Mishkan, they should come and do the Mishkan in its tent. When it's covered. As Karasav, its clasp, its karoshav, its planks, its brichav and its crossbars, its amudav, its pillars, its adonav and its bases. Now she says the Yiriya, it's a Mishkan. When you call the Mishkan, these are lower tapestries, which are near the which was seen in the Mishkan. As Oyaloi, what means the cover? That's the second cover. The cover that was made for the roof. That was the Izim, the cover of the goat's hair. That's Mechseu. This is the top third cover that was of ram skins and of Tchoshim skins. And that's the three expressions. That's Aram Vezbadim. You should make the ark and its poles. That's Akapetis, the cover. That's Preichas HaMasach and the partition curtain. Now she says, as Preichas HaMasach means the partition curtain, anything that forms a shield, whether it's from above or from the side, it's called a Masach or Schech. Similar to Shchata by the, you shall protect him. So Masach is a concept of a protection. So therefore there was two kinds of protections, really. There was something that covered the actual ark. When they carried it, they didn't carry it in the open. It was covered. There was a cover over it. They made a special cover that covered it over. As Al Shulchan Vezbadim, you should make the table and its poles. That's called Caleb and all the utensils for this Shulchan table. That's Lechem Apanim and the showbread itself. She says, Rashi already explained this. That it's called because the fact that the surface of the opposite side was shaped like an open box. That the Lechem Apanim was made like a box. You can stay faced. They faced, both sides faced each other. As Meneres Amar, you make a candelabra to illuminate. It's called vessels. That's an Eriseh, it's lamps. That's Shem and Hamar, and the oil that gave light. Rashid's Keleh, what's the Keleh? The tongues and the ash pans. Eriseh, lamps, bowls where the oil and the wick was placed. As Shem and Hamar, Rashi says, it's also required the skill of wise-hearted men for the production is different than other oils. As we learned in Menachos, he picked the olive from the top of the tree and thus produced kosis. It was the first step of the process. So it was extremely that they used to get 1 drop or 2 drops out of each olive. As Mizbach HaKteris, and the incense altar, as Badav and its poles, as Shem and HaMishcha, and the anointing oil, as Kteris HaSamim and the incense, as Masach HaPesach, HaPesach HaMishkan, and the screen that entered the tabernacle. Now she says this was the curtain, the front east side, where there were no planks or tapestries. It was just a curtain that be able to cover the entrance of the Mishkan. As a Mizbach HaOlah, then you're going to make the sacrificial altar. There's Michbar HaNachoshes, and it's copper grate. Ashaloi, which it had in the middle, as Badav, its poles, as called Caleb, and all the utensils that was used for this Mizbeach. As Akir, you have to make the lever, and its Kanai, and its base. Within Koyahanim would wash their hands and feet. Verse number 17, as the netting of the courtyard, the pillars, and its base. That's Masach Sharachotza, and also the screen, the entrance screen, the doorway. There was a screen, was a curtain that was the entrance of the courtyard. Now she said here the word chotze is referred to both the masculine and the feminine. And many other words are similarly. The words you have the Torah vacillates, goes back between the masculine and the feminine. It's Masach Sharachotza. This was the curtain spreading on the eastern side across the middle of the 20 cubits of the width of the courtyard, where the eastern was altogether 50 cubits wide. But 15 cubits towards its north were closed off by nettings. And similarly in the south, it's said there must be 15 cubits. So it's 50 cubits in the width, 15 on each side were totally closed. And then they had this opening a little bit more east. And that's where they went around the opening. So he stood in front of the Mishkan. You didn't see anything because you had this curtain. So you had to go. That was the covering curtain. As he stays on Mishkan and the stakes of the tabernacle. As he stays on Chaytz and the stakes of the courtyard. Ves Meisreim and all their ropes. Now she says Yisdeis is in order to insert and fasten the ends of the netting to the ground. You have to put like these sticks. You know what they call that, stokes. They put in the ground. Meisreim, those are the ropes that connected them to the ground. As big the Asrad L'Sharos B'Kodesh netting placed the cloth for use of the tabernacle. As big the Kodesh and the garments of holy garments for Aaron, as big the Banav and the garments for his sons. l'chayin, to become a kohen. Actually says big de hasrod. This is actually said this a couple times if I remember. Big de hasrod, the netted cloth. This was concerning for the covering of the ark and the table and the candelabra and the altar. They had a special cover, and they would cover it when the altar, when the tabernacle was being dismantled for travel. They would cover all these utensils and carry it with a special. They had a cover. And the entire community, after Moshe Rabbeinu came down the mountain the second day, the day after Yom Kippur, and he said to them this command, and they all went to work. They all went to work. We know that Moshe Rabbeinu told them this command on Yud Aleph Tishrei, and by Rosh Chodesh Kislev, this thing was done. It was all done. It was done pretty quickly. And even though the Mishkan was not established until Chodesh Nisan, so the Mishkan was done already. Kislev, Tev, Shvat, for another 2 months, the Mishkan was not put together, and it was not in service until the Chodesh Nisan. The Eibush said, one day you will dedicate the Mishkan in Kislev, and that happened in Hanukkah. Okay, that completes the Chumash for today. We go to the Tanya of the day. The Alter Rebbe says as follows: let us elucidate still further the term that you may do. The Alter Rebbe said, I established the whole Tanya in this verse. How close the verse says, for the matter is very near to you, in your mouth and your heart, that you may do. La asoisei. And the Alter Rebbe said that even though it's far from our hearts to do things, but to move our hearts is not an easy thing. But la asoisei, for the concept of action, it's easy. That's what the Alter Rebbe said. Now the Alter Rebbe goes to the concept la asoisei, that you may do. Whereas I mentioned, the climax of the verse emphasizes the concept of action. So that's all you need to awaken your heart. The Alter Rebbe explained at length that the concept of awakening the heart, emotions, that we should do things, the right things. Gam lo, the Alter Rebbe wants to go explain the word la asoisei in depth. Let us also understand in a very small measure, the purpose of the creation of a Beinoni, which according to the Tanya is all of us, to be and remain forever on the level of a Beinoni. For as explained in chapter 14, the souls of a Beinoni are usually incapable of rising to the level of tzaddik. That's it. Through their own will and effort, they have to push it, ask the Eibush to make them maybe change their reality. But in general, that's what you're going to be. That's going to be my avodah. The rest of my life is to be a Beinoni. They were created to be Beinonim. So in essence, that was your purpose, and that's what Alter Rebbe says. You should be happy. You should be happy with your lot. This is what you were created for, and that's what God wants from you. So therefore, we did understand a little bit what's the purpose of this. The purpose that the soul descended to this world. The clothed itself in an animal soul. This is what this is. Imagine Eibush to put a godly entity in the most immoral and the most terrible situation, in a terrible situation. And not only that, and they can never banish this situation. They're simply going to be stuck with this situation for the rest of their life. It's impossible for the Beinoni to push away their animal soul from the left side of the heart. That's in his heart. He's always going to have this animalistic soul, part of his being. So he's always going to have, he's not going to be able to say that one day he can reach a level that he's not going to have machshavas zadas. It's not a reality. So therefore, he's always going to have machshavas. He's always going to be in this struggle. So that's what it's so much of the Beinoni, the essence of the animal soul, derived from klippa, remains, remains in its full strength, and its potency as Kitoldos. That's it. And my animal soul is Baruch Hashem alive and well, and he's like he was born. Whatever the potentials or the thoughts that this animal soul has, that's what it's going to have. Loy Lavad is going to be stuck with this concept. So this is like an unfair situation. The emphasis of the Beni is that he has potential. He doesn't take the potential into action. The action is the garment. So the potential is the emotion. So he has the emotion, but he's not gonna garment himself in this reality. It's not gonna do it. So in the forms of expression of as evil thought, speech, and action, do not clothe himself in their body, as mentioned in chapter 12. The whole concept of Beni doesn't allow himself to actively think that he has the moment of thought. That's his nature. But then he pushes it off because he's in control of his thought. Alter Rebbe explains that it means a constant battle with his animal soul. The Beni prevents the budding evil of his soul from expressing itself in thought, speech, and action. That's what the Alter Rebbe, and that's the beautiful teaching of the Alter Rebbe. However, since the Beni succeeds only in suppressing the garments of the animal soul, but he can never, despite all his efforts, affect the change of the essential evil nature of that soul itself, the question arises. So now you have a question now that Rebbe says, like, this is like crazy. If this is what life is going to be, in Kain Lama, so you got to ask yourself, the Rebbe says, no, it's not fair. You understand, a person comes into all of them, he has the capability to become a tzaddik. Oh, that's the whole purpose. He becomes a tzaddik, he gets rid of his evil. That would be a purposeful journey. What's the purposeful journey if I'm never going to change who I really am? And I'm basically going to be the same animal soul like I was before. So think about it, that they strive in vain. They're doing action in vain. There's no end to this war. So it's an everlasting war. So what is the purpose? Why would the Eibishter bring a neshama to the world that he'll have an everlasting struggle? What's the pshat? It doesn't make sense. You come, you're victorious, you win the war, you change the situation. That's really what makes sense. For the neshama to come down to the world and to have a struggle from day one till the end of time, and seemingly never ending. So he basically, the Rebbe said this lashon on himself: Lagir larik, Pashit vain. I came to the world and I didn't accomplish what I wanted to accomplish. Lahevel larik, it was a waste of time. Chas v'shalom. Chas v'shalom. You can't say that. Chas v'shalom. But you think about it, the Alter Rebbe says, seemingly, it's like seemingly, we say every time a person passes away, he accomplished his mission. According to the Alter Rebbe, didn't accomplish a mission. The mission was to transform the world. You never transformed my own animal soul. So therefore, what do I transform the world? I didn't transform my own nefesh habahamis, my own self. I didn't transform. Forget about the world. Because they're going to fight this whole war. In my Yetzer, they're going to an everlasting war, and he can't vanquish it. This is a question. And explained in the previous chapters that an ongoing battle waged by the Beni is preventing his evil inclination from asserting itself in thought, speech, and action. Cause is a great pleasure above. How then can we explain the battles in vain? How could the Alter Rebbe say this? The whole explanation went through that we explained that the Eibush has a great joy. So the Alter Rebbe is like trying to use harsh words. The Hevel Arik, that was nothing. Vain. It was a waste of time. Chas v'shalom. Yeah. Where there's divine pleasure, the sole object of the battle, there'll be no reason for having divine soul clothed with an animal soul. On the contrary, the two souls ought to then be separate and distinct from one another, so that whenever the divine soul emerges victorious from a particular struggle against the desire of the animal soul, or act or speak violently, it would then act alone, without the participation of the animal soul. That should have been the way it should be. You go, you have the battle, and then you go on your own. And you go again, you have the battle, and you go on your own. But it didn't happen. You were never on your own. And that's according to the Tanya. You don't go on your own. You're never on your own. So even as you do the mitzvah, and you're still with your animal soul. So this is like unfair. Since the divine soul is clothed with an animal soul, the objective of obviously lies in perfecting the animal soul itself. From this perspective, the battle of Beni does not seem fruitful, since all efforts of changing oneself has no effect on the evil nature of the animal soul. So here, the Alter Rebbe gives us the question of all questions. According to what he explained till now in Tanya, we have the question of all questions. What is the purpose of my godly soul coming into this situation? That I'm going to be a Lavai Beinani, that I'm going to be, I wish to become a middleman, when I had to realize that this Avodah is never going to end. So Alter Rebbe says, let us, for calm explanation, let my explanation give them solace, to comfort them a double measure. I'm going to give them a double measure of comfort. Ulutashia, I'm going to give them strength. The samech libam, and I'm going to give them to gladden their hearts. They should be happy. In God, which the Eibishter God rests in them. The Alter Rebbe says something beautiful, because the Alter Rebbe says, even though you're not a tzaddik and you have an animal soul, the Eibishter, everything that you do, even if you still have the animal soul, the Eibishter God is sheichen in your action. God dwells in, even you're not a tzaddik. God dwells in your learning and your you bring the Shekhinah just like a tzaddik. You're just like a tzaddik in your actions. Meaning, explanation will show them how to find comfort and joy in the godly light that abides within them when they study Torah and when they engage in the service of God, even though while they're studying Torah and while they learn what, they still have an animal soul. Not a tzaddik. They haven't purified their animal soul. Your animal soul is as strong as it was in the day you was born. You were born. And nevertheless, when we sit and learn Torah, we're doing right now, we're learning Torah. The Eibishter himself is sheichen right now in our midst with our animal soul. The Alter Rebbe establishes this fact. This is amazing, because this should uplift us to realize we don't have to be perfect, and we can do perfect things in an imperfect way, because we're talking about God. And Alter Rebbe is going to now establish a beautiful statement of the Zohar. This is I'm going to explain it in the statement of the Yenuka. Yenuka is the young one, young sage. The Yenuka said something on a verse. The Zohar brings down this name, Yenuka. Yenuka is the young. It was a sage that was extremely young. They didn't want to say his name. He was so young. Said in the verse, the wise man's eye is in his head. That's the pasuk says. A wise man has his eye in his head. So your comments, where else is the man's eye? What is man's eye? Everybody's eye is in his head. So what is the meaning of the Zohar? Every person has their eyes in their head. That's where their eyes are situated. Surely this meaning of the verse is as follows. We learned to the Braisa, we learned that a man must not go 4 cubits while bareheaded. A Jew, a man, needs to have a yarmulke on his head. So you're right. You cannot walk 4 steps. Not for 4 cubits is 6 feet without a yarmulke on your head. My timer. Why do you need to wear a yarmulke on your head? Because Shchinta Shayaresha. Because the Shechina, the presence of God, rests upon your head. And since the presence of God, a man, rests upon his head, he needs to wear a yarmulke. He needs to cover his head. And he shouldn't walk 4 cubits without a yarmulke on his head. Not in shul, not in the street, not in his home. He should always wear a yarmulke, because Shchinta Shayaresha, the Zohar says, and you should wear a yarmulke on your head. Oh, Chacham. And if therefore it says, every wise man, meaning interested and concerned, and hence also his speech consecrated in his head, meaning in the light of the Shechina that rests and abides above the head. So a Chacham, who's a wise man, realizes the Eibush is above him, and God is on his head, and therefore he puts a yarmulke. So if he's a Chacham, if he was a smart person, he would wear a yarmulke. He would wear a covering over his head, and make sure to wear a covering over his head. And again, it doesn't make difference. It shouldn't be only in the shul. It shouldn't be it should be everywhere. Because if the Shechina is above your head, then the Shechina is above your head. And therefore, whenever you can have, you should. So that's why it says, Chacham, the Zohar says, if you were smart, you would realize that the Shechina is above your Eina Bereisha. You would realize, you would see that the Shechina is above your head, and you would wear a yarmulke. Now, when his eyes, meaning his interest and his concerns are in his head, he must know that there's a light that is kindling above his head. There's a light. He's the candle. There's a light above his head. It's the light that shines upon it requires oil. So there's a light above his head. That's the Shechina. That's his soul, godly soul, above his head. If he puts a covering on his head, respect to the neshama, to the godly soul, to the godliness. But this neshama, this light, needs to have a candle and needs oil. Begin the gufad banash ipsila. So man's body is the wick that retains the luminous flame. This body is the wick. This is the Zohar. This is all the Zohar. This is a statement of the Yunke and the Zohar. So his body is his wick, the candle is his soul, and the body keeps the soul here. The body contains the soul. To keep it with the body. Shlomo Malka Tzava right? And thus King Solomon cried out, saying, "Let there be no lack of oil above your head," because we need oil. We need oil. The candle does the fire doesn't only need a wick; it needs to have oil. If it's not going to have oil, it's going to burn out the wick very quickly. The light over the head needs oil, and what is the oil? Is the good deeds. The oil for this neshama, for this light, needs to have good deeds. Needs to have Torah mitzvahs. The good deeds that man performs are the oil, which supplies the light for his neshama. And now you understand the pasuk, that the wise man, his eyes is in his head, to ensure they never lacks oil. He's always looking at his neshama. He's a wise man is always looking at his soul to make sure that his soul is well fed. The fire above him is well fed, is respected and well fed. And that's the way the neshama, that's the way the Jew continues to make sure that this neshama is well fed by giving it Torah mitzvahs. Ad han l'shaynai. The quotation of the Zohar, this is where the quotation ends of the Zohar. So we just learned a statement in the Zohar. The Alter Rebbe is going to explain this Zohar. But this is where the Tanya ends today. Today is the 16th day of the month. And the Tillim for the day is 79 to 82. If you do those 4 kapitlach, you do the chitas of the day. The Rebbe writes in the Yom Yom of the day, the Alter Rebbe said, the offering for the sanctuary included gold, silver, and copper, but nothing sparkled except the mirrors presented by the women. So there was the mirrors. The Jewish women brought mirrors. From these mirrors, Moshe Rabbeinu was a little shocked, as the Medrash says, that these women brought mirrors. He didn't ask for the mirrors, and the mirrors are made for vanity. So he said, "What are you going to do with these mirrors?" He was like a little bit perturbed that the women brought mirrors. But the Eibush said, no. Accept these mirrors from them, and they and put it above the basin when they cover the copper basin with these mirrors. But these mirrors are fashioned the way basin and its base. They were last in the sanctuary articles made, but were used to start every sanctuary service. The Kohen couldn't start a service without washing his hands and feet in this basin. So it was made the last, it was used the first. For their beginning is implanted in their end. And the Rebbe explained this concept of death, in depth, the concept of the women's, it was used for them beautifying themselves. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu was shocked that they brought these things. And the Abish said, no, that this should actually be part of the Beis Hamikdash, and it will become part of everyday service because they did L'Shem Shamayim. So even a thing that was used for vanity, the Abish says, no, everything can be used for the sake of the Beis Hamikdash, sake of the service of the Beis Hamikdash. That's number one. Number two is the avodah for a businessman includes arousing within himself the faith and the perfect trust in the one who feeds and sustains all flesh, that he will provide him with an ample livelihood. He must be truly happy and cheerful, as though all the livelihood is in his hand. So the Rebbe says, true emunah in the Eibishter and betachon in God is when you trust God, that like if the money's in the bank, you have to feel that the money is in the bank, even though the money is not in the bank. But a Jew has to feel that everything comes from the Shamayim, and if the money is supposed to be in the bank, it's in the bank. And that, my friends in Mitchell, I invite you all today at 10 o'clock. We'll learn together. Tanya can come to the JEI, the school right over here in this center, JEI at 10 a.m. or come on Zoom. I wish you all a wonderful day, and Mitchell, we'll see you tomorrow, 8 o'clock. We'll continue the Chitas of